At 09:47 a.m. on November 17, 1944, Private First Class Jacob Jake Hayes sighted the lead German grenadier's helmet through the unearthed 8-AG scope of his M1903A4 Springfield, positioned not in a tree nor in an attic, but flat on his stomach on the freezing pine needle-covered forest floor near the village of Wassenack in the Hürtgen forest. Hayes was the last effective sniper in the entire 28th Infantry Division sector. The enemy knew his location was secured by a dense belt of Shoe Mine 42 anti-personnel mines, and that a continuous high-volume counterfire had been suppressing American positions for 72 hours. He had been given a single impossible directive: stop the flanking maneuver of the Kampfgruppe Schörner, a force of over 400 battle-hardened troops, before they cut the supply road, a task normally requiring a full company of infantry. In the next 2 hours and 3 minutes, Hayes would be credited with 18 confirmed kills, using a forbidden, unconventional position that defied every doctrine taught in the American sniper school, forcing a critical pause in the German advance. The air in the Hürtgen that morning was a mix of acrid cordite and the damp, earthy smell of disturbed soil. Hayes' breath plumed out in the sub-freezing air, instantly dissipating above the low gray canopy. The forest floor here was a tangle of fallen timber, razor-sharp shrapnel, and shallow, muddy craters. The standard operating procedure for every sniper in the United States Army was clear: find the highest vantage point possible, a sturdy tree, a stone church steeple, anything to gain line of sight and elevation. Hayes' commanding officers called his preferred location, known only to him as the hole, an unacceptable risk and a waste of a trained asset. They had threatened him with disciplinary action after the last warning, but the front was collapsing. This moment, this precise confrontation, near a shattered German pillbox designated Ausgang 3, was the collision point of rigid military doctrine and desperate common-sense innovation. The German patrol, led by an experienced Oberfeldwebel, moved with aggressive confidence, convinced that any American response would come from the usual, easily suppressed high ground. They had already been delayed, frustrated by the tenacious defense of a single platoon holding a nearby crossroads. But they were now moving fast. They were 300 yards out, closing rapidly on the exposed flank of Baker Company. Hayes checked the 5 rounds in his magazine, adjusted the core stock cheekpiece he had jury-rigged with canvas and pine sap, and prepared to break every rule he had ever been taught, knowing that the price for failure wasn't just his life, but the complete collapse of the American line. Jacob Hayes was born in the bustling, working-class Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts, in 1920. His childhood was defined by the relentless, rhythmic clang of the Four River shipyard, where his father worked as a welder. Jacob, or Jake, spent his teenage years working first as a caddy at the city's exclusive golf courses, and then as an apprentice mechanic at a small garage near the docks, specializing in tuning high-compression engines for bootleggers and local racers. The hours were long, the work was dirty, but the attention to detail was everything. He learned to feel the subtle vibration of a faulty timing chain, to spot a hairline fracture in an engine block, and to understand that small misalignments caused catastrophic failures. This blue-collar background provided him with an instinct for mechanical precision and an exceptional ability to read terrain. Caddy work had forced him to read the subtle slope of a green, the wind speed, and the distance to the pin with almost unconscious accuracy. The mechanic work made him intensely aware of vibration, recoil, and the perfect balance required for a mechanism to function optimally. Jake was fiercely stubborn. This trait, seen as a flaw by his father and a nuisance by his drill sergeants, became his hidden strength. He didn't just accept good enough, he chased perfect. He didn't just follow the manual, he wanted to know why the manual was written that way. In sniper training, he was constantly reprimanded for unconventional shooting positions and modifications to his issue rifle stock. An officer once called him a garage monkey who can't follow a book. Jake simply filed that away, knowing the book hadn't been written by the men who lived and died by its rules. He knew intimately how small changes to a system's balance could yield exponential results. The American sniper doctrine in the European theater was fundamentally broken for the conditions encountered in the dense, broken landscape of the Hürtgen forest. The doctrine was built on the premise of clear sightlines, which did not exist. It demanded high ground observation posts, OPs, which in the Hürtgen simply translated to perfectly silhouetted targets against a gray sky, framed by the dead upper branches of the trees. The M1903A4 Springfield rifle itself was a weapon of incredible precision, but its supporting doctrine turned it into a casualty magnet. Snipers were told to find a tree with a good field of fire, secure themselves with ropes, and wait. The Germans, fighting on home turf, quickly learned to identify the typical OP locations: the largest pine, the chimney top, the church tower. When a sniper fired, the German machine gun 42, MG42 teams immediately bracketed the elevated position, cutting the sniper and his spotter down in a hail of 7.91 tumfar. The cost was astronomical. Jake saw it firsthand. On October 30th, 1944, near the town of Schmidt, Sergeant Frank Lefty Russo from Patterson, New Jersey, was killed instantly when his perch in a massive oak tree was hit by an 80mm mortar, round adjusted off his tracer line. Russo, a gentle man who dreamed of opening a deli, left a wife and 3 young daughters. Russo had told Hayes, "This tree is killing me, Jake. I can feel the wind sway the scope." Jake was 300 yards away when the tree disintegrated. 2 weeks later, on November 14th, during the abortive attempt to take Hill 400, Corporal Robert Bianchi watched his spotter, PFC Campbell, die of internal injuries sustained when a volley of rifle grenades shredded the camouflage netting around their high ground position in a shattered brick farmhouse. Bianchi carried Campbell's body for 3 miles through the mud, saying nothing. Campbell was only 19 from Alabama and had only been on the front for 4 days. A third, chilling example occurred on November 16th. Sergeant Ray McKenna, one of the best shots in the division, had been positioned in an abandoned log cabin attic. After his first 2 shots, German engineers simply detonated the entire structure with a shaped charge. McKenna's body was recovered 2 days later. The enemy was adapting faster than the doctrine could be changed. The statistics were horrifying and understated. Officially, the casualty rate for specialized American forward observation and sniper teams in the Hürtgen sector was recorded at 38% in the month of November alone, almost twice the rate of line infantry. Unofficially, Jake estimated that 6 out of every 10 snipers who chose a high ground OP were hit within 48 hours of deployment. The German counter-sniper teams, often using captured Russian PU-scoped Mosin Nagants or their own Kar 98K with Zeiss Zielvier scopes, were systematically hunting American elevated positions, leading to a profound sense of helplessness. Every time Jake saw a sniper team move out, he felt the chill of their imminent death. Jake's frustration was palpable. He was a killer trained to save lives, but the very system he worked within was making him and his friends targets. He observed the forest floor, the subtle dips, the cover afforded by the root systems, the way a pine log could shield against fragmentation. He realized the problem wasn't the enemy's skill. It was the predictability of the American doctrine. The system was failing his men. The core issue, as Jake saw it, was vibration and stability when using the mandated elevated position. A man tied to a tree branch, no matter how sturdy, was an unstable firing platform. The slightest tremor, a breath, a strong gust of wind, the distant concussion of artillery, translated into angular movement at the scope, rendering the rifle inaccurate at the crucial moment. Furthermore, the mandatory high ground position severely limited a sniper's ability to rapidly change targets or extract himself after firing. Jake identified the root cause of the failures. The system prioritizes sightline over survivability and stability. He performed a simple mental calculation. If a branch moved just 0.01 inches at a distance of 10 feet from the trunk due to wind, that translated to several feet of variance at 500 yards. A sniper needed a zero vibration platform, and the ground was the most stable platform available. He also needed a low profile to break the enemy's visual search pattern. Jake brought his observation to Captain Edward Foster, the company executive officer, a man known for his rigid adherence to field manuals. "Sir, we are being slaughtered on the high ground," Jake said simply. "They know exactly where to look. We need to go under them." Foster, a recent West Point graduate with no combat experience, dismissed the concern instantly. "Hayes, the sniper manual is clear. Section 6, Part A. Achieve maximum elevation for superior field of fire. Your job is to eliminate targets, not to lie in the mud. The German artillery is within spec for this sector. We've calculated the probability of a direct hit. The manual works. It's pilot error or inadequate camouflage that is killing our men, not the regulations." Foster's words, "The manual works," felt like a punch to Jake's gut. The manual was a piece of paper, and his friends were dead. Jake walked away with a profound moral dilemma: follow the rules and send more men like Russo and McKenna to their easily predictable deaths, or break regulations, risk a court-martial, and introduce an unconventional, untested method that might save lives. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Every American loss reinforced his conviction that he had to become a rule breaker. He would trade the threat of prison for the chance to stop the relentless counting of his dead friends. The mechanical precision he learned tuning engines would now be applied to the deadly mechanics of warfare. The final shattering trigger came on the evening of November 16th, the same day McKenna was killed. Private Willie Sims, Jake's current spotter, and a 19-year-old kid from rural Nebraska, was clearly suffering from combat fatigue. Sims broke down in the cold, damp dugout, quietly sobbing into his ration kit. "I can't climb the tree tomorrow, Jake," he whispered. "I just can't do it. I saw McKenna's position. It's a death sentence." Sims wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of predictable, pointless death, a death that could be avoided by using common sense. Jake looked at the boy who was supposed to be his eyes and ears and saw not a coward, but a victim of a flawed system. This was the trigger. He could not send Sims up to die. He could not watch another friend become a silhouette. Jake's decision was immediate and absolute. The rules were written in peacetime. They had no place in the Hürtgen. Saving a life was more important than preserving the sanctity of a field manual. He told Sims to report himself sick with trench foot in the morning, and to tell no one where Jake was going. The moon that night was an intermittent ghost behind the low-hanging clouds, creating a dangerous, shifting darkness. Jake slipped away from the company area at 10:15 p.m., moving toward the old logging trail that bordered the A, German-held sector. He carried his M1903A4, a field shovel, and the 6-inch length of high-tension wire he had salvaged from a wrecked German Kübelwagen, his secret modification material. The air was frigid, and the damp smell of pine sap and mud was heavy in the low-lying mist. He was going to build his position, his forest floor OP, in the hours before dawn. The night was a struggle against the frozen ground and the deafening silence of the forest, broken only by the distant, intermittent thump of outgoing American mortars. Jake worked alone. The grease from his rifle bolt was thick and cold on his hands, and the smell of oil and pine needles mixed on his wool gloves. His first task was to dig. He selected a spot beneath the dense, low canopy of a half-fallen pine, where the thick, interlocking root system formed a natural shield. The shovel struck frozen soil and stone repeatedly. The physical struggle was intense, a relentless, quiet battle against the earth. He worked until 01:15 a.m., scraping out a depression barely 18 inches deep and just wide enough to accommodate his shoulders and rifle. This was not a foxhole. It was a shooting scrape, designed only for concealment and stability. The modification was next. The main challenge of prone forest floor shooting was the tendency for the M19903A4's wooden stock to pick up and amplify the minimal vibrations of the firing cycle against the uneven ground, leading to an inconsistent point of impact. Jake used his mechanic's intuition. He took the high-tension wire and, using his knife and a smooth stone, began to meticulously wrap and secure the wire around the thin forestock of the rifle, just ahead of the front sight band. He was creating a micro-tension sling point, a small, isolated area of pressure against his firing hands that would stabilize the barrel in the uneven scrape. He cut his thumb on a sharp burr in the wire, a small bead of blood instantly freezing on his glove. He then addressed the bipod. The standard rifle did not have one, so he had to create one. He used 2 short, thick sections of birch branch and secured them to the rifle sling swivel with thick canvas strapping. He worked by the dim light of a covered flashlight, his sweat evaporating instantly in the sharp cold. The goal was to create 2 specific, adjustable points of contact with the ground that were isolated from his body's tremor and provided a maximum sight plane of just 4 inches above the duff. The meticulous work took 45 minutes. He measured the tension on his wire wrap. It was roughly 0.4 lbs of resistance at the sling point. He tested the setup repeatedly, dry firing into the night. It felt solid, a part of the earth itself. He knew the risk was massive. This was a non-authorized, field-made modification and a complete violation of his deployment orders. If he was caught, The least he faced was a court-martial for destruction of government property and disobeying direct orders. The worst was dishonorable discharge and prison time. But as he settled into the scrape, the cold seeping through his clothes, he felt a moment of doubt quickly replaced by commitment. The rifle felt balanced, right. The ground was his friend. He had built a perfect machine for this terrain, a precision instrument rooted in the cold, damp earth. He was ready. Hayes did not return to the company line. He settled into his scrape and waited for the dawn of November 17th. He spent the hours before light memorizing the terrain, the 3 o'clock angle of the German pillbox rubble, the 5 o'clock line of thick wind-damaged pines, the small muddy creek bed at 7 o'clock. He was looking at the world from 4 inches off the ground, a perspective that made the familiar forest look alien. He saw the line of GIs from Baker Company walk out toward their forward positions, small, hunched-over figures in the dawn gloom. They were following orders, moving to positions that were fundamentally exposed. All he could do was wait. He had told no one about the modification, the homemade bipod, or his location. If he died here, the secret of his forest floor hide would die with him. The sun came up weakly, painting the low mist a sickly yellow-gray. He pulled a thin layer of pine boughs over his back, securing the camouflage. The low-altitude engine rumble of a distant German spotter plane could be heard briefly, then faded. He laid his head on the cold, hard wood of the stock's cheekpiece, checking the Unapproved 8AX scope for condensation. The lens was clear. The waiting was the hardest part. The moment when his stubborn decision would either be validated or end in a predictable, violent failure. He said nothing. The mission was routine: provide observation and interdict any identified enemy movement near the crossroads, designated Ausgang 3. This was the same crossroads Baker Company was tasked with defending. The Germans, however, were not engaging the crossroads directly. At 09:40 a.m., Hayes saw movement at 1,000 yards through a slight gap in the pine line. It was not a patrol, but a wedge formation of approximately 50 German grenadiers, moving with a disciplined urgency. This was the flanking maneuver he had been warned about, the advance of Kampfgruppe Schörner. Hayes' radio crackled to life, a short burst of static and a strained voice. "Red Dog, this is base. We have high-volume contact on the road. Repeat, high-volume contact. Need interdiction on our flank. Immediate." The voice was Captain Foster's. Foster's tone was frantic, completely lacking the self-assured rigidity of their last conversation. Hayes pressed the transmit button. "Base, this is Red Dog. Acknowledge flanking force. They are 600 yards and closing on Baker's 7 o'clock. The standard doctrine called for him to target the officers and NCOs first, then suppress the formation. But standard doctrine was too slow, too predictable. He looked through the yacht scope. The lead grenadier, an Oberfeldwebel with a confident stride, was clearly visible. The man was walking into a killing zone. The low scope placement gave Hayes a ghostly subterranean view, a perspective the enemy was not expecting. The time was 09:47 a.m. Hayes placed his finger on the cold metal of the trigger. He ignored the doctrine. He would not wait for the officers. He would fire at the point of the wedge and shatter their confidence first. The M1903A4 barked, the sound sharp and clean, a distinct thwack that seemed muffled by the dense earth around him. The recoil was a solid, manageable nudge, absorbed almost entirely by the ground and the precisely tensioned wire modification, not by his shoulder. The scope barely jumped. The lead grenadier's helmet snapped back, and he collapsed instantly into the muddy depression, his Car 98K clattering away. Hayes cycled the bolt, fast. The mechanical action was smooth, the shell ejecting cleanly. 09:48 a.m. The Germans were stunned. They immediately dropped and began scanning the high ground. Their eyes were trained on the treetops. This was the moment the forbidden solution became decisive. Hayes, mere inches from the forest floor, was invisible. A German NCO stood up, yelling a command, pointing toward a tall pine tree. Bad choice. Hayes adjusted the elevation slightly. The man was at 520 yards. He fired. Hit. The under-officer spun and fell backward, his command lost in the sudden spreading terror. Hayes cycled the bolt. 2 kills in under a minute. The formation scrambled for cover, diving behind stumps and fallen timber. The immediate, sharp-shooting accuracy from an unknown source terrified them. Their training dictated a counterfire pattern focused on the upper canopy. 09:50 a.m. A German MG-42 team began spraying the suspected high ground position, sending a continuous stream of 7.92 mm rounds high above Hayes' scrape. The bullets whispered through the high branches, wasted ammunition. Hayes tracked a grenadier who was attempting to flank wide to the right, using the 6-inch thick trunk of a shattered birch as cover. The man was running, a small dark shape. Hayes led him by less than a foot. 7 seconds of pure focus. He fired, hit. The man stumbled, dropped his weapon, and collapsed, clutching his chest. Hayes worked the bolt, his pace mechanical, relentless. His civilian experience as a mechanic, the constant demand for precision under pressure, had taken over. He was simply tuning a rifle system to maximum efficiency. 09:55 a.m. 4 kills. The flanking maneuver had stalled. The lead element was pinned, completely disoriented. The most dangerous threat emerged. A German sniper team of 2, a man with a size Silvier and his spotter, who had just set up in a distant standard doctrine high ground position in a sturdy oak. The German sniper was the first to realize the fire was coming low. He began methodically sweeping the forest floor. The distance was 800 yards. This was the eyeless edge of the M1903A4's effective range. Hayes knew he had only one shot. The slightest vibration would make this impossible. He held his breath. The German sniper was turning his rifle, sweeping toward Hayes' position. Hayes focused on the bright reflection of the German scope's glass. He squeezed. The recoil was the firmest yet, but the rifle held its zero. The German sniper's reflection vanished. Impact. The German slumped forward. The spotter immediately dropped his binoculars and fled. 10 a.m., 6 kills. He had eliminated the counter-sniper threat. Hayes kept firing, using the brief window of opportunity created by the enemy's confusion. He tracked the men as they moved from cover to cover, firing quickly, accurately. His low profile and the stable bipod allowed him to track, acquire, and fire in less than 6 seconds per target, unheard of in the unstable high ground positions. 10:30 a.m., the German formation was decimated. They were no longer advancing, merely trying to survive and extract their wounded. Hayes was down to 800 rounds remaining, total estimated ammunition for a sniper for this duration. The final threat came as the Germans attempted to retreat. An Oberleutnant, shouting orders, organized a desperate suppressive attack, firing his MP-40 submachine gun on the move. He was a brave man, but a target of opportunity. Hayes took aim. The officer was moving at a fast clip. He fired, hit. The officer dropped his weapon. The remaining German grenadiers broke, retreating into the dense forest, leaving behind a trail of dead and wounded. The flanking maneuver had been stopped. The supply road was secure. 11:50 a.m. Hayes ceased fire. He waited for another 10 minutes to ensure the retreat was complete. Guns dry after the final kill. The only sound was the faint radio static and the sound of his own heavy breathing. He had not moved from his scrape in over 2 hours. The mud was frozen to his face. The action sequence had validated the forbidden solution. He had achieved 18 confirmed kills in 2 hours and 3 minutes, stopping a force of over 400 with a single stable rifle, a wire modification, and a scrape in the cold earth. Hayes extracted himself from the scrape, stiff and numb with cold, the smell of burnt powder clinging to his clothes. He walked back toward the lines, his boots crunching on the frozen earth. As he neared Baker Company's position, Sergeant First Class Miller, the platoon leader, rushed out, his face a mixture of shock and relief. Miller's jaw was slack. "Hayes, what in God's name happened out there?" Miller stammered. "We heard one rifle, but it was like a machine gun. They just stopped, completely broken. Our spotters are reporting 18 bodies, maybe more, left on the tree line. The lead German officer is dead. 18 confirmed kills, 0 probables, 1 man." Hayes' reaction was calm, matter of fact. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the dull ache of the cold. "I found a better firing position, Sarge. It was stable." Miller, a hardened veteran, walked over and looked at Hayes' rifle, noticing the crude homemade bipod and the high-tension wire wrapped around the stock. "What did you do to your rifle, Hayes? That thing is not standard issue." "It shoots," Hayes said simply, shrugging off the scrutiny. He focused on the immediate task. He began to check the damage on Miller's position, processing the raw data of the kill streak. Miller's crew chief, a corporal named Dean, was counting the impact craters on the pillbox. The amazement was universal. The men felt they had been saved by a ghost. Later that afternoon, back in the relative safety of the rear, Private First Class Ted Harrison, a sniper from the adjacent 110th Regiment, heard the stories. Harrison was a meticulous, by-the-book marksman who had lost his spotter just days earlier. He sought Jake out near the company mess tent. "They say you got 18, Harrison said, his voice low with respect and suspicion. "They say you were shooting prone, in the mud. How did you do it?" "My rifle jumps when I try to shoot low. The wood stock moves on the uneven ground. I can't stabilize the crosshairs." Hayes explained reluctantly the simple premise. You need to decouple the rifle from the vibration. The ground is stable, but the rifle touching it isn't. I used tension wire on the stock and a short, fixed bipod to create a stable 3-point contact. The stock doesn't flex, the rifle doesn't jump. It makes the ground the shooting platform. He demonstrated the principle with a stick and a piece of string. Harrison's eyes widened as the technical explanation clicked into place. "It's physics," he breathed, "not marksmanship, decoupling the platform." Word spread instantly. It was underground adoption, a survival tactic passed from man to man, bypassing all official channels. By morning, every sniper in the 28th Division knew about the Boston bipod and the forest floor hide. By afternoon, mechanics and armorers were being asked for scrap high-tension wire and small pieces of wood. By evening, reports were trickling back from the front that American fire was becoming inexplicably accurate, and the German counterfire was becoming less effective. The officers didn't notice initially, attributing the shift to a change in German tactics or simply luck. Captain Foster noticed the reduction in sniper casualties, but couldn't explain it. He still saw Hayes' rifle modification as a violation of regulations. But he couldn't argue with the results. There was no official documentation, no engineering approval, just whispered conversations and the constant rhythmic tap-tap-tap of men modifying their stocks in the dark. It was an enlisted man's revolution, a truth discovered in the mud, not in a classroom. The Germans were the first to understand.
Sandbag assembly positioned himself